Harrison Smith sitting in for Owen Schroyer today, the 18th of February, 2019, and I have joining me now as guest William Gheen. You can follow him on Twitter at ALIPAC, that's ALIPAC, or at alipac.us. Thank you so much for joining me, Mr. Gheen.
Glad to be back, Owen.
Oh, it's Harrison sitting in for Owen today, but...
Oh, sorry. Sorry about that.
It's an honor to be confused with Owen Schroyer. I try to do what he does, but but you know, it's perfect that we have you on today, and I want you to explain this email that you sent out. I'll just go ahead and read it for the radio listeners out there. It says, "Heads up, American media. The website www.fakehatecrimes.org is down this morning. They just had listed the Jussie Smollett false flag scandal as number 348 and 349 on their tracking list. I do not know if they're down due to unprecedented web traffic or if they're a victim of a DNS hacker attack or if their ISP took them down. But yeah, you have this website, fakehatecrimes.org, that goes down on perhaps the eve of the most prominent and famous fake hate crime that we've seen in recent times. So can you just tell us what's going on here? What is the status now? And do you have any more information on the fact that this website, fakehatecrimes.org, was taken down this morning?
Well, first of all, you know, I don't have any formal association or affiliation with the site. I found it some time ago, and I've been tracking and admiring the work that they're doing there. Of course, the main thing I'm known for in the country is fighting against illegal immigration and amnesty for illegals. But that crosses over into this hate crime genre because yours truly and many others are falsely maligned and put on hate lists by the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Anti-Defamation League, which, if you think about it, what they're doing is very, very similar to what we just saw Jussie Smollett do, because they're doing the same thing. There's a bias there where they're going around trying to blame people falsely for being violent and racist who are not. And that's the same theme. So what Jussie Smollett just tried to do and almost got away with, and by the way, he had to hire Nigerians because apparently setting up fake hate crimes to blame Trump supporters is a job Americans won't do. And today, you know, the story broke mostly over the weekend, but today's Monday. It's the beginning of the press cycle. And so some factor, either intentional or unintentional, has taken fakehatecrimes.org off of the web. And it's not all that special, the website. I mean, it's a simple database format where they've listed now 348, 349 fake hate crimes since about 2016. And they're busted, and they're busted big time again, right after they've already been busted with the Covington High School kids. So, you know, the media, meaning like MSNBC, CBS, Associated Press, New York Times, they're running from this anti-white bias narrative, false defamatory anti-white bias narrative, one story after another. And as soon as a story loses its charm or credibility, they drop it and move on to the next one. Because what they're counting on is the way it works is, all right, Jussie Smollett claims he was attacked by two white men who poured bleach on him and hung a rope around his neck. And my spidey senses said, no way, as soon as I saw it. I've dealt with the left so much. I mean, well, first of all, it's not like I'm psychic or anything. If the left is trying to tell you something emphatically about race, there's a 90+% chance it's false on the surface, especially, and then if you add the word racist or racism into it, there's a 95+% chance it's false. But the other things that tripped me out sort of tripped me to the fakeness of this was it was just too perfect. It was like Smollett said he didn't put in the MAGA hat, somebody else did, but the whole thing from the news to the bleach to the MAGA country to where this happened, when this happened, it just all smelt rotten. So I went to Twitter and I said, this is rotten, and this should be number 348 on fakehatecrimes.org. And today it is, but no one can see that because their site's down. However, we are going to put out another little boost to my media list you guys are on. So thankfully, most of the website's still available on Wayback Machine. And I'm not sure, it may be in the Google cache system. And so we want people in the media, because right now there are all these people writing different articles in the press about what just happened with Jussie Smollett. And it should be linked into and tied to fakehatecrimes.org, but you can't because somewhere along the chain, they've been knocked off. We're trying to reach out to the people or the person or persons behind the site and no response yet. But I'm glad you're covering it because, you know, The third, if you go down on the website, they put in Smollett at 349 and 348. Right at 347 is the Covington High School student set up. At 346 is an InfoWars article about the fake hate crime the media or someone concocted in Houston about 7-year-old Jasmine Barnes, who they tried to claim was shot by white supremacists, a 7-year-old little black girl. And it turns out she was not shot by a white supremacist. She was not shot by a white person. She was shot by a black male.
So that's three stories very, very recently in rapid succession that turned out to be utterly fake. Now, the Jasmine Barnes one, tragic story, little girl gets shot. Obviously, people's emotions are fired up from that, and you know, they run with it without doing any due diligence, without looking into it at all. Total mistake. However, you do understand that if that would have been racially motivated, okay, yes, big hate crime. Same thing with the Jussie Smollett. You're putting a noose around the head, blah, blah. But I really, you look at the Covington Catholic school kids, that had as much outrage, that had as much vitriol, as much anger, even more in a lot of cases. And what was the so-called hate crime there? Smirking. The kids smirked. And it's treated like this massive hate crime. So I think that's something that people really need to understand, that like the media and these activists are so starving and hungry for just the slightest semblance of a hate crime that they'll take absolutely anything and run with it, even if it's not even remotely a crime, even if it's some high school kid standing there and smiling while he's essentially being assaulted by a man with a drum. So it's not just about, reporting false hate crimes. It's about just this hunger that they just are desperate to call anything a hate crime. It's insane.
Well, it's their key to taking power. I mean, they're pumping in people of color from all around the world into the United States and feeding them this false narrative that the current indigenous people of the United States of European descendancy are all rabid, racist, hateful, evil, violent people, when by the statistics we're the safest people in the world. Except for the Asians. Many places in Asia have lower crime stats than we do. And if you look at,
than we are typically, though.
Well, they're more homogenous societies in many ways, and in Japan and China. But also, when you look at the actual crime stats, I mean, the biggest problem seems to be in our black male community by the statistics. And it's you can't have that conversation without being falsely accused of being a racist. This thing. So the other thing is, I truly believe. And of course, the views of your guests do not necessarily represent the views of the host and the network InfoWars. I believe there are people out there in America, when you look at the crime stats and the big disparity between white on black crimes versus white on black crimes, it happens, but not so much. Black on white crimes dwarfs it in scale. Okay, how much of those violent crimes and even property crimes from people of color against Caucasians are being fueled by the false narrative and the blood libel defamation that's in almost every movie, almost every commercial, every fake news report. I believe there are people out there in America right now who have been harmed, suffered loss, injuries, and even deaths because of this propaganda designed to stir this up. And in the case of Jussie Smollett, the dude was trying to or could have ignited a race war with this type of thing. We live in a country where within a few hours and the viral nature of the internet, things can get out there, whether it's true or false, and all of a sudden a lot of very violent type of misunderstanding responses can happen. I mean, look at the Covington kids. They had to abandon their school, had to abandon their home. Anybody that ends up in the focus on this, even if it turns out to be completely false, has to go into hiding for fear of violent retribution. So people are paying a cost.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely ridiculous, and we'll get into it more on the other side. My guest is William Gheen. You can find him WilliamGheen.com. That's William, Gheen.com, or Gheen Report, again, Gheen Report.com, or on Twitter at ALIPAC, ALIPAC, or at ALIPAC.us is another website you can find him. We'll get into all of this and more on the other side. So my guest is William Gheen. You can find him WilliamGheen.com or GheenReport.com or ALIPAC.us. Now, Mr. Gheen, you're the expert on illegal immigration, and there's a lot of illegal immigration news that I'd love to talk to you about. But while we have you here, and you're really hitting the nail on the head with this Jussie Smollett case, this exposed hate crime hoax. And so I want to stick on that for just a little bit. And you're talking about you're not associated with it, but you helped get the word out and let people know that this website, fakehatecrimes.org, was taken down this morning, and we're not sure about the cause of that, but we're looking into it. But in addition to that, I had my friend post a Daily Caller article that just quoted Jussie Smollett of saying, I never said that about the MAGA hats, and Facebook takes it down, saying that it was against their community standards. So this isn't some, speculation. This is the reality that the big tech and the mainstream media, they push the hate crime hoax, agenda. And then when it comes out that it's false, they don't even let you report that. They literally will censor you from doing that. So that's not a speculative thing. That's actually happening. But what you brought up last segment is the flip side of this, and that's the fact that there really are hate crimes against Trump supporters and against white people who are assumed to be Trump supporters. There was a guy in Austin, had his skull cracked. He could no longer. He was a saxophone player by profession. Could no longer do it because of the pressure would injure him. So lost his job, and he's giving an interview, and he's like, I'm not even a Trump supporter. I don't even like the guy. I guess because I'm white, the guy said F Trump and hit me in the head. I mean, there's videos of guys getting their orbital bones cracked, people saying F Trump. There was the mentally disabled guy who was kidnapped and scalped in Chicago. I mean, so talk about the flip side of this, how they're not just do they run with every, hint of a hate crime, by white people, but then when it's the other way around, it's radio silence on the mainstream news.
Oh, listen, the mainstream news, in my opinion, has concealed mass atrocities against the United States citizenry by illegal aliens. And it goes back into different layers. Before Trump, it was the Tea Party. And I'll give you a couple of examples you might find interesting. Sometimes a shooting would occur. And of course, anytime we hear a shooting occur these days, we all get on edge and hold our breath to see who they blame. And it doesn't have to be a conservative, a Christian, a Republican, or even a white person. For instance, in the Trayvon Martin case, they took George Zimmerman, who is a Hispanic Jewish Obama voter who tutored black kids in his spare time, and turned him into an evil white male with a gun. And so it doesn't have to be a white male with a gun is bad story, but they'll turn it into that. Jared Loughner, who shot Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords in a terrible act of mass murder, and several others, when the confusion and chaos was happening about who shot Democrat Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords and her party there, who shot her, a press release or some type of memo was actually sent from an FBI office or fusion center out to the media claiming that Jared Loughner was in the Tea Party. Jared Loughner was not a Tea Party guy. He was a Democrat prior volunteer on Giffords' campaign. But what people remember, they hear that there's been something happening. They tune in. They're like, what's happening? Somebody shot a bunch of people. Who was he? Why was he doing it? Oh, it was some white guy who was a Tea Party guy. Then the interest falls off, and 2 or 3 days later, you find out the truth, but less than 10% of the people who listen during the peak interest are there anymore. So they always hear the fake news shouted, but they don't hear the corrections happen later. It also happened with the mass shooter in Aurora, Colorado, the Batman theater shooter. Somebody came out and ran out saying that he was some Tea Party conservative. He wasn't. So there's a pattern of a well-orchestrated, organized, funded campaign in this country to carry this on. And it goes back even further. My home state, you're probably a little younger than me, but do you remember the Duke lacrosse thing?
Course.
Do you remember that?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Huge story.
Okay. It went on for what? A year or two. We had a national conversation about how these white fraternity brothers had abused and conducted a violent sexual crime against a person of color. And it went on and on and on about it to the point that small school kids in Alaska knew the name of the DA, Mike Nifong. Okay.
Right.
As soon as it comes out that it was all bogus, it was all wrong, there was nothing to it. It was a drugged out stripper who lied to police and others to try to get out of trouble, and people, feminists and others, and the news just taking a run with it. As soon as it's revealed that it's fake, it disappears, and there's no follow up. I remember the day that the Duke lacrosse boys were at the podium having a press conference. They interrupted that press conference to go to the Don Imus story. Don Imus had made some insensitive comment about a black female basketball team, and they're on to the next white guys are evil story. And underneath that, this constant defamation, it's costing white men jobs. It's costing us relationships, romantic relationships, marriages, homes, our children. It's putting us at greater risk of violent crime. It's doing all these terrible, horrible things in the country that's based off these type of lies. And this one, back to the Jussie Smollett, the biggest fingers in the pie. Nancy Pelosi is deleting tweets about this. Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, Al Sharpton, CNN, MSNBC, E! News, big fingers all stuck into this madness. And we've got to have that national conversation. Facebook's going to try to stop it. Twitter, all of Silicon Valley's H-1B foreign employees are going to do their very best to make sure it doesn't go viral, that it's like a fire that they put out a little bit at a time. But we have to have this conversation because it's a matter of personal and national survival and security, that we find the different groups in this country that are trying to foment perhaps wide-scale unrest and wide-scale upheaval and possible race and civil wars. These people need to be unmasked, identified, prosecuted, and delineated out of the American media and political sphere as soon as possible. Our personal and national survival and security depends on it.
You know, I completely agree. And you bring up the Duke lacrosse case. They will still bring that up. If you listen to you know, the alternative socialist media, Vice, Vox News, Young Turks, those type of people, they'll still bring up that case as if it was still real. They'll say, yeah, well, I mean, at least, and it's like, well, but that was totally fake. Say, yeah, but, you know, they still treated them too well when we thought it was real. I mean, they'll still have some sort of twist to it, even though, as you say, it was years ago. The truth has been out forever, undeniable. It was a falsity. It was a lie, and yet they'll still bring that up as if it's real. It's just ingrained into their head now that this is something that happened, and they'll just totally run with it. And I think the important thing
they still bring up Ferguson and hands up, don't shoot.
Yep. Yeah, they do. Again, yeah, exactly.
The grand jury ruled that it never happened, and it took them over a year because they went through all of the eyewitnesses and everybody that claimed to be an eyewitness that said they saw the hands up when Michael Brown shot. It didn't happen, and everybody that saw it had a different. But the people, once again, people hear what is shouted from the rooftops at the beginning. And back to the left, okay. Beyond the illegal immigration, my main website, alipac.us, is the largest archive of information about illegal immigration in the world. And in there are stories after story after story of Americans assaulted, murdered, and raped by illegal immigrants. If a group of illegal immigrants gang rape an unsuspecting American citizen female tonight who is a Caucasian female somewhere, okay, it might make it into the local newspaper and the local news station, okay? The Associated Press and Reuters, the news, the New York Times, they won't touch it. They keep it completely concealed. I've seen stories that would make people's, you know, skin want to peel off and make them shriek when they read it, that something like this could happen on American soil. But crickets chirping, and not because they didn't know. I mean, we've press released this material. We've banged on those doors. We're like, hey, why aren't you reporting this? And they're like, oh, I see nothing. But well, me, as a white male, I could go out right now to any major street in America, say some crass and impolite, racially insensitive things to a person of color.
It's a national story.
It will, and I will be a national story for weeks to come. I'll have to go into hiding to protect myself from physical violent reprisals, death, or injury for some careless words. But yet illegal immigrants can gang rape at will around the country, and the socialists and the media can be counted on to conceal those crimes and many, many more. The true magnitude of suffering and crime that's being caused by America's open borders and unenforced immigration laws at this time is astronomical. And to be honest with you, it's on the scale of war crimes.
Absolutely, and it's largely unknown, unreported. I mean, I know maybe Europe is a little bit farther down this road, or maybe there's a little bit more honest about it. We know it's happening here, but this story from today from Paul Joseph Watson on Infowars.com, German police lie about migrant crime statistics to, quote, preserve peace. They say there's no lying, nothing's hushed up, but things are deliberately left out. We can't let the people have the truth. We need to keep them in a state of ignorance so we can continue to push stuff that they're not going to like. We can't have them pushing back. Powerful stuff, absolutely incredible. I wish you were on for longer so we could talk about illegal immigrants, but I got more guests to get to. That's William Gheen. ALIPAC.us is his main website, and that's also his Twitter. ALIPAC is how you find him on Twitter. Thank you so much for being with us, Mr. Gheen.